Hello, I'm Senior Airman Austin Jackson, and welcome to the State of the 908th. For the better part of the last 2 years, the wing has executed the largest deployment in its history. We've dealt with the constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic and are currently in the process of transitioning to our new mission as the formal training unit for the MH-139 Grey Wolf helicopter. Today I have the privilege of sitting down with the commander, Colonel Craig Drescher, to discuss this, our new mission, vision, priorities, and many more questions on the minds of our airmen. Thank you for joining us for the State of the 908th. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Colonel Drescher.
It's really good to be with you. This is actually a lot of fun for me, especially to visit with someone like yourself and the wing.
For the past few years, there has been a lot of transition within the wing. We've had COVID-19, the largest deployment, and now we're transitioning again. And I've heard you and Chief mention this mantra, getting back to basics. What does that mean, getting back to basics here at the wing?
The back to the basics came from, just like you said, there has been a tremendous amount of activity in the wing. And as we were coming out of that, we sensed it in the middle of the chaos that, I think we're missing some stuff here. Because we were so focused on the deployment, for example, surviving COVID, things of that nature. And so we realized, we got to get back to the basics of knowing who's on our team. Are they here or not? Is that individual airman being developed? The basic things that we do in a military organization to make sure that we are then ready to speed up and handle more chaos. And this is a great time in our wing to take that pause. And as an example, I just left the alternate command post where we stood up the WCC to communicate to the UCC so we could practice the basics of communicating when we have a chaotic situation going on. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about when we talk about, hey, let's get back to the basics. And a lot of that centers around the individual airmen, which I think we're going to get to here in a little bit. We're
transitioning to this new mission, and many people are wondering, and then obviously things can change, but many people are wondering, when will we likely see these new helicopters, that MH-139?
Yeah, that is a loaded question, for sure. Because a lot of this is out of our control, and we just don't know. This is a brand new helicopter. There have been delays with the rollout. It's getting firmed up, and so we're hoping that late next summer, so maybe August 23, we will start to see the first couple helicopters. We're going to get a total of 10. We're hoping to get 2 or 3 late next summer. And then there will be a period of time of activating the site as well. So we may have some here and we may not be able to use them, and that may take a while. And we're negotiating with the manufacturer now to kind of work that out.
And with this new mission, how do you see our Maxwell Air Force Base and then our surrounding communities? How do you see them being impacted by this new mission?
Well, in some ways, I think there'll be a lot of impacts, and in some ways, not so much. The wing is going to stay roughly the same size, maybe a little smaller. We're going to have 10 aircraft. We were an 8 PA unit, but we often had 9 assigned. So that's not a huge difference. The ops tempo would be very different. We will fly probably 3 times as often as we did in the C-130. And probably more than 3 times as many flying hours as well. So, the flights are very different from what we did in the C-130, but there will be more activity. So our community may see, the helicopters in the air more often. But of course, they're smaller, they're quieter, so they might not see or hear them as much as they would the larger C-130. As far as other impacts to the community, we're going to have a larger full-time footprint here in the 908th. So we're going to have more full-time people, ARTs and AGRs, in both the ops group and the maintenance group than we've had before. So as the community looks at that, they're like, oh, that's more financial impact. You bet. Students coming in, active duty students, we'll have some active duty members as assigned to the 908th helping us to conduct the mission. So again, you're talking a larger financial impact in the river region. And that's why in the long run, I think for this region, we're going to see net positives. It's emotional for some of us that have a very deep tie to the C-130. It's very sad to see that mission go, but there's a lot to look forward to in that new mission as well.
Along those lines, sir, so when we're talking about like the transition and everything that's happening, will any of our facilities have to change? Any type of transition to our buildings?
Yes, absolutely. A couple things are happening. For example, as we look at our suite of ops buildings, we call them the 1050 series, those buildings probably weren't laid out for optimal performance before the mission change. They're certainly not laid out for optimal performance for the new mission, because the new mission is going to have different demands. So we have, I think it's a total of 11 projects that we would like to complete. A lot of that will be repurposing our buildings. We'll have a couple brand new buildings built, but those are kind of smaller in scale. And our largest project is to take the half bay hangar in 1455 and turn that into a simulator complex. That's going to hold 6 simulators and a lot of academic classrooms. So that's going to be the biggest, most significant change. So yes, a lot of our buildings will change. On the big scheme of things, when the Air Force does things, if you realize a hangar can cost like somewhere between $150 and $200 million, our projects are much more smaller in scale and scope than something like that, and that's one of the reasons why we were chosen.
And just kind of on that vein, sir, of transition, how does this transition impact these different areas of our mission, of our wing?
Change is the word, right? There's going to be a lot of change. How the maintenance group and the ops group has operated the last 40 plus years is going to be very different. The tempo of a training mission is very different. It's much more regular and has to stay on schedule because it's very hard to recover when you get off schedule. So, for example, we will likely, I talked about an increase in number of flights. We will likely have 3 launches a day, where on a busy day, in the old mission, we'd have 2, a morning and a night. So 3 launches a day. We may be going to at least 2, maybe 3 shifts of maintenance. So we may have maintainers work 24/7, where we didn't do that very much in the past. So that's a couple of the changes. And there are going to be times where we have to make up ground on weekends and holidays. And while that was always an option in the past, that is probably something we'll see more often in the future. So the tempo of the mission. So not only are we going from a large fixed wing aircraft that provided tactical airlift to a much smaller rotary wing aircraft, and our mission is to train students. That's a lot of change. And our primary purpose as reservists is to be ready to deliver combat power. We talk about that at UTA all the time, right? Ready, ready, ready. What does readiness mean? But our doc statements say we need to be ready to deploy in 72 hours. And that's why we have to be ready all the time. Well, we're going to have in maintenance and ops, except for the AE squadron and ops, they are not going to have the same deployment requirements that we've had in the past. But we will still need to be ready because there will be some deployment requirements. And a lot of our readiness requirements aren't just to deploy, but it's to be an airman ready to go and do their job at any time. So many of our readiness requirements will stay, but how we deploy in the maintenance group and the ops group will be very different.
Wow, you talked about change, how difficult it is, and sometimes, and if there is an airman out there who says, I want to cross-train into a different AFSC, what would you say to that airman?
Yeah, well, great. That would be wonderful, right? And unfortunately, we have a lot of unknowns. So I'm glad you brought that up, because one of our challenges has been to communicating that very thing to the airmen. And it's not because we haven't wanted to communicate it. We're not sure yet what exactly to communicate. It's getting more firm every day. So I'll talk about the ops group first, because that's more firm, and we understand that better. We're looking at aircrew transitioning from the C-130 mission to the MH-139 mission, and that's a more clearly defined path. We're going to have more full-time instructors in the ops group than we've had in the past, and that's where most of our current people will end up in ops as full-time instructors. In maintenance, it's very different. The full-time footprint in maintenance, mostly in the form of arts, is going to increase by quite a bit. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for full-time positions. With the traditional reservists, it's going to be different. Our footprint of traditional reservists is actually going to shrink, and I'm sure that provides some level of anxiety to the airmen. And this is the message I want to really send on that topic. There is a place for you in the 908th if you want to continue to participate here. It may look different than it does now, and part of that we just don't know. So to get a little bit more technical in the maintenance group, and luckily we have some really smart people working on this. Chief Quincy Hester, Master Sergeant Joel May are leading the way on this and figuring out how do we take these positions, AFSCs, jobs that we had in the old mission and translate it to the new mission, because it's going to be different. And we still haven't quite figured out yet how that will transition. And will it be an easy transition from an older job specialty to a newer one? What exactly are the skill sets? This may also be an opportunity for, particularly in the maintenance group, for airmen to look at, I've thought about maybe cross-training to another AFSC. I talked to a couple airmen at lunch a couple months ago during the UTA and said they were interested in being, I think it was logistics planners in the LRS. Well, they've got vacancies. So we have vacancies at other units across the wing, and I hope the airmen in the maintenance group especially, who are looking to maybe do something different, they will go explore those opportunities in our other units, because they'd love to cross-train them and hire them into those positions. In the maintenance group, people are going to have to get retrained, right? It's as you imagine, maintaining an MH-139 helicopter is much different than a C-130, but an engine is an engine to a certain degree, right? So there's some things will transition a little more easily, and some it's going to be harder. But if you have questions about that, I'd really hunt down Chief Hester and Sergeant May, and they would have more particulars on how to explain to that airman how they will fit into that new mission.
To just make it known is what you'd say, that I definitely want to make sure I'm a part of this.
That's absolutely. Speak up. Let it be known what you want to do, whether it be in the maintenance group or to one of our other units in the 908th. And we're also helping people to find a home if it's somewhere else. We'd hate to lose them out of the 908th, but we've helped airmen find a landing spot with the Air National Guard unit up in Birmingham and other places as well. So we want to help you find a place that's going to be a good fit for you. Hopefully we can keep you here in the 908th, though.
You all led a 2-day strategic alignment, and out of it came our new mission, vision statement, and our wing priorities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So thanks for asking me. I want to read my notes to make sure I don't get a single word wrong. Our mission statement is to develop and deliver multi-capable airmen. Vision, the premier wing that inspires transformational servant leaders and exports excellence. And our priorities: developing airmen, accelerate and sustain readiness, communication, and prepare for the MH-139 bed down. So that is our new mission, vision, and priorities, our MVP. We had ended up with about 35 people from across the wing, various ranks, all squadrons were represented. And it was a great collaborative effort, better than I've ever seen before. You could tell that everyone felt comfortable to contribute, which led to a really, really good process. And it is a process. It is 2 days. It really ought to be 4 or 5 days, but it was 2 days of roll up your sleeves, get to work, a lot of mental gymnastics of trying to understand our organization so we could project forward.
I really want to go through these with you to talk about kind of what they mean and how can we live that as a wing.
I wish everyone could have participated in the process, because you could have seen how during the 2 days we evolved to these. But we're hoping that when an airman looks at our MVP, they'll be able to see themselves that day and what they're doing is how either they're helping to support that mission statement, or they can see themselves in the vision or the priorities. And let me add, those are the 4 top priorities the group came up with. we literally had dozens of priorities. But part of the hard work is, and they're all good and they're all important, but what were our top 4 for the next 2 to 3 years? And so just because a priority is not listed in one of those 4 doesn't mean it's not important to the wing. I just want to be clear about that. There's a lot of other things out there, but we hope, like, take developing airmen, and this is part of our back to the basics. We know that during the last couple of years, in focusing on deployment prep and deploying so much, and we had to, and that was our top priority, to make sure everyone was ready to deploy. We neglected to focus on some of the individual airman things, whether that be a fitness assessment or physical, or a performance report, or a decoration, or maybe an individual airman's progress in their skill level or their PME. And so part of our back to the basics is not only understanding who's on our team, but developing that individual airman. So I was thrilled when that showed up as one of our top priorities. In August last year, I said 22 is going to be the year of the airman. And so I was thrilled to see our priorities developing that airman.
I like that, the year of the airmen. And we spoke at one while about something interesting in the vision, which was servant leaders.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, servant leaders?
Again, I wish a lot of people could have been in the process, because I actually tried to say very little, because I wanted the group to come up with the mission, vision, and priorities. And when they came up with transformational servant leaders, I was thrilled. One of my tenets, personal goals of leadership, is to be that servant leader. And when some of the smart people came up with transformational servant leader, I thought, well, that is just perfect for us, because we are transforming this wing, and we need great leaders to do that. And what better than a transformational servant leader? Someone who puts others in the organization ahead of themselves and is leading positive change in the wing. And then right after that, the exports excellence. And that is a phrase that I have latched onto, because one of my mentors, who used to be here at the 908th, then Colonel Collie von Hoffman, now Major General Collie von Hoffman, who was our maintenance group commander, she used to talk about how the maintenance group was exporting excellence. And I thought that was great. You know, someone can know where you come from because you're exporting excellence. And we want everyone to know that someone has either been assigned to the 908th or came through the 908th as a student, and they can tell they did that because they're out there exporting excellence.
I love that. You said we have some time in the process of this transition, and it's not going to happen overnight. I think Mr. Taylor has said. What do you want airmen to know about right now, as far as what do we do right now in this time, in the middle of this transition, until we get where we want to be?
Well, that is there's a lot in that question right there. Let me try to break it up a little bit. I would say, you know, this is a great time to make sure that we're developing that airman, and that includes a lot of things. If you're in our AE squadron, you're focusing on a short-term deployment. We currently have about 20 people deployed to Europe who are supporting the things going on in Europe, and they'll be home soon. But about half of those people had been home less than a year, and they volunteered to deploy again. Our AE squadron got a short notice deployment, shorter than normal, because of the way we've changed how we're presenting forces to combatant commander, AV4 Gen. And so our AEs got asked to deploy again, and more than half of them had been home a short period of time and had waived their dwell requirements because they're volunteering to go back and serve again. Which is, I point that out because we have just a wing full of extraordinary, selfless leaders and willing to do that. I mean, the vision statement, it fits. So you have the AEs and the ops group that are focusing on that. Folks in the ASTS and the mission support group, in a lot of ways, it's business as usual. They're going to have the same deployment requirements. They're the same in garrison requirements that they're always working on. When it comes to our operators and our maintainers, you know, where the change is huge, it's to try to figure out best you can what your role is going to be in the new mission, and make sure that we're getting you the training that you need. And that's a little, as we discussed earlier, we're a little uncertain for some people what that exactly is, but seek that out and then continue to take this time where there's a bit of a break in the action in some ways in ops and maintenance to make sure that you're developing yourself as an airman. You know, and you're doing the things that you need to do to ensure your career progression.
Well, you kind of hit on my next question. What are the areas that you would say the wing is succeeding? Where are we doing really well?
Oh, I tell you, I love talking about what the 908th has done the last couple of years. As I talk to my peers across Africa, and we've actually gotten a lot of recognition the last several months of just how significant the contributions of the Airmen and the 908th has been the last couple of years. How we prepared for the largest deployment in the history of the wing. About 24% of our wing was deployed at any one time, which is a huge lift in a reserve organization. And then what our airmen did out there on deployment was just incredible. So what everyone at home did to get them ready, and then what the airmen did on deployment was just fantastic. So I'd have to say we did that really well, right? I would say what we're doing well now is, and I appreciate it's challenging, I think everyone's keeping their head pretty good and trying to kind of go with the flow with all the change because it is uncertain. We get delays all the time, right? Just in the last 24 hours, we've gotten news about challenges that we're going to face with those building projects that I spoke about earlier. It's day in and day out. It's almost changes multiple times a day. And just hang in there with us and try to be patient and ride it through. This is a very difficult and complicated, multifaceted remission. I submit it's the hardest one the Air Force has ever taken on. And I know it's challenging and frustrating, but just bear with us. And one of the things we're trying to do is we've had our Program Integration Office, the PIO team, working these issues now for well over a year. While we were doing the important work of preparing and deploying, we tried to make sure that the wing didn't have to be burdened with those issues. And so we just kind of kept that in the PIO team. But now we're in another phase of the transition, and we're encouraging the members of the PIO team, especially in the ops and maintenance groups, to go out and more fully communicate what we're doing. Now the majority of the ops group and all of the maintenance group is part of the PIO team. And so your job is to help us with this transition.
What makes this the hardest transition in the history of the Air Force?
It's hard to kind of get your arms around that, so I'll take a stab at it. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, we're going from a large aircraft, fixed wing, tactical airlift unit to a smaller rotary wing aircraft that's going to be a formal training unit, so training students. So that's a huge leap in just that mission. You know, the aircraft themselves are very different, right? We went from a older aircraft. Most of our C-130s were built in the mid-'80s to something that's going to be brand new. And brand new can be wonderful, but it also means there's a lot of undiscovered challenges ahead of us. There's 3 MAJCOMs involved. Air Force Reserve Command, Air Education and Training Command, and Air Force Global Strike Command. You know, that means there's at least 3 different points of view to every issue that we come up with. So that's just to name a few of the challenges that I say this makes this the hardest remission the Air Force has ever taken on.
So would you say that we're building a lot of this from the ground up?
We certainly are, but we've got amazing people on the team. You all did a great story on the PIO team, and Mr. Taylor's the director, and the members of that team, they're doing phenomenal work. And I told them a little more than a year ago, I said, you all are going to be leading 3 MAJCOMs from here at the wing level. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy, because a wing doesn't lead a MAJCOM. And I said, yes, you will. And after several more months, they came back and they said, we get it now. We are leading the 3 MAJCOMs. I'm like, exactly. Through what may be the hardest remission the Air Force has ever taken on.
And we've talked about what the wing's doing really well. We've talked about what the PIO's doing really well. What are some areas that we could improve as a wing?
At the strategic alignment event, we went through a lot of exercises. We did a SWOT analysis, and so one of the things we looked at was our weaknesses, and it was in our strengths and opportunities, et cetera. And it was interesting to listen to the hear what the 35 people in the group had to say of what we were doing well. And I will tell you, some of the weaknesses identified were communication. Which, made it to our priority. By the way, that also came up, a lot of you mentioned it on the DEOC survey. So thanks everyone for filling out the DEOC survey. So that's an area that we said, hey, we need to get better. And I think we can always get better, but it was a good reminder that we need to focus on. So we'll do something like this right here. We're hoping to have a wing-wide commander's call if COVID will cooperate soon. Another way to communicate. We're hoping to get the PIO team more out into the ops and maintenance group and to share more of the information. We want the airmen to know as much as possible. So communication was one of the areas. Another area that came up that we could stand improvement on is maintaining standards. And whether and that's part of the back to the basics. Whether that be, for example, a fitness standard, a medical readiness standard, making sure everyone has their performance reports done, dress and appearance, right? We have published standards, and it takes work and discipline to make sure that we're enforcing the standards and maintaining the standards. But there was unanimous agreement from our group of 35 that we needed to put some emphasis on that. And I think it was only natural that there was some deviation from that. If you look at the impacts of COVID and how we didn't have traditional UTAs for a long time, and still our UTAs are modified a little bit, I think that lent itself to maybe some deviation from the standards. And then also the tempo. To have so many airmen focused on deployment and then deployed at one time, our units aren't in their normal battle rhythm. And when you get out of that normal battle rhythm, it can lead to some deviations from the standards. So that's a couple of areas that we've said we really need to get back to the basics and focus on these. And we're making great strides, by the way. Incredible improvement in our medical readiness. We're now in one of the leading groups in 22nd Air Force with our medical readiness. Our performance reports are much, much better. Still got a ways to go. So that's why, getting back to the basics seems to really fit of what we need to be focusing on.
And in getting back to the basics, are there any short-term goals for the 908th?
Boy, I wasn't ready for that question. You got me with that one. Short-term goals. I would say the couple things that I just mentioned. We're doing really good with the medical readiness. We have been peaking above 80%, but I think a short-term goal should be 85%. And we're discovering a lot of reasons why that happened, and we're fixing them. So I'm having confidence that we're going to get to where we want to be and stay there. Same thing with the performance reports. Challenges with my eval. We're all going to have to learn how to use my eval like we struggle to learn to use VPC, and so that we can make sure that we're taking care of each airman, developing each airman, and part of that is having that performance report.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to our wing?
Yes. I'm incredibly proud of what the airmen of the 908th have done. It truly is extraordinary, and they don't get to see some of the things that I get to see. For example, about 8 weeks ago, we briefed the senior-most leaders of Air Force Reserve Command in a commander update brief about what we had done in our deployment and what we're doing with the remission. And we got accolades from the general officers across Africa. I've never heard so many before. And I wish that all the airmen could have heard that, to know that their efforts are being recognized. So I would add that. I would want them to know how valued their contribution is from the senior leaders at Air Force Reserve Command. And then I would like them to, like I said earlier, to stay focused. This is a challenging time in many ways, but stay the course. And this is new and different. That's what change is. But hang in there and work with us. Help us make it better. Help us find a better way to do it. This is the time to change the way we may have always done something. This is a great opportunity to reshape and redefine the culture of this wing.